What we are going to be doing for today is going to compile all of the news of the announcement of patch 11.2. The announcement of Season 3, which very timely came right after we got the release of 11.1.7. So after the last patch of Season 2, we now got the announcement for Season 3. So what you are seeing right here, scrolling down, are all of the available appearances of the new tier sets that will become available in Season 3. These are for LFR, normal, and then heroic, and then mythic, and then the same two different versions for the PvP ones. Now, as for the news of the patch itself, we are going for the first time to Karesh, which was one of the homeworld of the Ethereals, which got blown up by Dimensius after sucking the world soul out of the planet. The TLDR for the lorelets who don't care at all about this is that the Ethereals took or stole the dark art we were chasing in this expansion, so we are going to try to pick it up from where they fled to. Now, the biggest novel of the patch, because I'm sure you expect the new Mythic Plus rotation, I'm sure you expect a new raid to be there, new tier sets as well, the biggest novelty is of course the new artifact cloak, or let's say the new legendary available for everyone, the cloak, the Reshi Wraps, that will come in 11.2. Now, this legendary will have 3 different modes depending on whether or not you are spec'd as healer, tank, or DPS, which will do the expected things. Heal if you're a healer, give you some absorb shield when you take damage if you're a tank, and do some damage if you are a DPS. It does, however, have some pretty cool extra things. For example, one of the mid-tier bosses of the raid, the Soul Hunter's encounter, will have a bunch of drops for the 4 different armor types, which will increase the proc chance of the effects of your artifact cloak by 50% to make it stronger. The last boss will also be dropping a ring, which will further empower the value of your artifact cloak by giving you cosmic damage reduction when it procs, and on top of that it is an unknown socket. That socket is a fiber socket, which will be a craftable socket where you get to choose the secondary stat you want on the cloak. There is no new thing about this craft. All of the materials are the current expansion, current season materials, and they're very cheap, and you get to pick basically the secondary stat you want on your artifact cloak. The artifact cloak will also have the active of being able to phase dive, which will be a feature available from this new season by turning your character into a being of pure energy. So you get to state, and in this state you get to see the world through the eyes of the Ethereals, which allows you to move to places you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. Now, most of this will have a use in open world, for world quests, for the story, to reach certain rare mobs, and then it will have some uses in the delves, dungeon, and raids. It will mostly just be a means of transportation, to be honest. It will be akin to like taking a gateway in a more fancy way when you are in a dungeon or in an instance. Now, besides this artifact cloak coming out, you have of course, as mentioned, the 2 new major things changing, which are the new raid and then the new dungeon rotation. We already knew something about the dungeon rotation because we already knew pretty much the first 4, because we voted for the first 4 dungeons, right? We voted for the Dawnbreaker, for Arakara, for Floodgate, and for Priory. We also already knew there would have been a new dungeon released in this patch, so that would also be part of the rotation, and that would be the Echo Dome Aldani. We get to meet back from Shadowlands with Venari again, and we are on our way to trying to bring in some life again inside of this dead planet. This will be very reminiscent, given how the planet looks like, very reminiscent to the Echo Domes you saw in Netherstorm back in the Burning Crusade. Now, as for the returning old dungeons, the ones chosen are Halls of Atonement from Shadowlands, of course, and the Tazavesh Mega Dungeon. It will be available both as a mega dungeon in Mythic 0 difficulty and then obviously split in two, just like back in Shadowlands, with Streets of Wonder and Solia's Gambit inside of your Mythic Plus rotation. Now, inside of the Mythic Plus news themselves, you also do have the news about the announcement from Blizzard about the Mythic Plus leavers finally being penalized with the new deserter system coming in Season 3. Now, we only have the announcement for now, but the announcement is basically something you have already seen in other games if you want to surrender. Practically, there is going to be an abandon vote if you want to leave. You put up an abandon vote and presumably we can guess if it's 4-1 successful, then you are able to leave without any penalties. Meanwhile, if the abandon vote isn't successful, then leaving the dungeon you will be treated as a deserter. Blizzard is saying that if you're leaving keys too often when it's released, they are not going to penalize you on an account level, so no dangers to your account or even cross character penalties, but you will be marked as someone who leaves often. So in the group finder you are going to be able to see other players who have quit a lot, practically as a warning if you are planning on inviting this player. Now, there is of course a lot of discussion to be had about this. For example, how could this be abused by players that are trying to grief, like for example abandon vote or I troll, these kind of things. But at least it's a positive move towards trying to do something against players who just leave after the first wipe, or they leave because they think the key will not be timed, so they just leave 20 minutes in even if the key was timeable, etc, etc. The other news regarding dungeons is that Blizzard is adding dungeon waystones the same way we have the checkpoints in the delves. That's basically all that is. So it's also a very good system to allow players to have an idea of when is the checkpoint reached, where are you going to be spawning if you die. Since it wasn't really visible back in current day, you would have to know at which point are you going to be resting in a good place in Mythic Plus, for example, or if you're still going to be resting back at the entrance of the dungeon, for example. Now you have this laid out very clearly with these dungeon waystones. Now, the last bit of news regarding dungeons is we have gotten some sort of scuffed do-it-yourself, we have it at home Shadowmeld. Now you will be able to craft, alchemists will be able to craft the Umbral Essentia. You can slink into darkness, reducing the chance for enemies to detect your presence, and effects will last 20 to 1 minute or ends upon moving. It is still a combat potion, so being a combat potion you will still have to choose this over a DPS potion, but now you have the option to have also Shadowmeld if you are not a Night Elf in a Mythic Plus dungeon at the cost of a combat potion. The next bit of news for instance content, of course, is the new raid. Manaforge Omega will come out in patch 11.2, and shockingly it will have, of course, 8 bosses as well as most of our past recent raids. Now, most of the novelty around the raid itself, besides what we already mentioned about your new artifact cloak, which will interact with a few mechanics or even some of the places you have to reach in the raid, so actually the artifact cloak is mandatory for the raid, will be the last boss, Dimensius. Blizzard has been very proud in pointing out how large Dimensius will be. We're talking about basically Stormwind. Imagine Stormwind, put it vertically, and that's as large and wide and tall as Dimensius will be in the encounter. So as for Mythic Plus and the raid, this is your raid mount achievement award for clearing the raid in Mythic, and this is going to be your Keystone Master mount from Mythic Plus, as well as your Keystone Legend mount from Mythic Plus. Now, the other thing relevant to the release of the season for both the raid and Mythic Plus is that we have again the 1 week split of content. So week 1 we are getting normal dungeons, of course, heroic dungeons, baseline season 3 Mythic 0 dungeons, world bosses, and non-bountiful delves. and then the Raid and Mythic Plus will come out 1 week after. So no mega rush on patch day to do everything because we have to go into Mythic Plus or start the Raid. You will have a 1 week gap. However, at the very least, at the release of the patch, just to know you still can do something before the release of the season, champion track gear will be available. Because of course, non-bountiful delves, but more importantly Mythic 0 will be there, so you will have the chance to deck yourself up in champion gear before the release of the season. And talking about what is available in Week 1, the Delves will have a new nemesis for the season, and the nemesis will be the return of Nexus Princess Kayvesa. To stay in tune with our ethereal themed patch, Kayvesa, one of the more praised and well executed boss encounters of Season 1, is coming back in Season 3, but in the form of a Delve enemy. As for the players themselves, what you have been seeing so far after the tier set appearances was the tier set bonuses for the new patch, which have the novelty of being split in two. So Blizzard is designing tier sets based on both of your hero talents, and each of the tier sets will be giving an effect for both of your hero talents, just in case we don't suffer this kind of situation, which has happened before to a few of the specs, where the tier set was just synergizing better with one hero talent more so than the other. Instead, now your new tier sets will just give you tier set bonuses for both. Yes, the cynicals will say doesn't matter, we're just gonna sim them both and simply play whichever one seems the best. Now our hero talent play will be dictated by whichever one of the two tier sets will be more powerful, possibly. So for the first time, instead of having a spec-based tier set, we are now going to have a hero talent based tier set. So now your warrior tier set will not be Prot, Arms and Fury. Your warrior tier set will now be Colossus, Montantane and Slayer, where Colossus of course is for Arms and Prot, Montantane is for Fury and Prot, and Slayer is for Arms and Fury. The last bit of major changes, at least as far as competitiveness goes, is for the class and spec changes. We're not quite in the rework territory, just a whole bunch of talent changes. This is going to be for Shadow Priest, Brewmaster Monk, Frost and Unholy DK, BM and Marksmanship Hunter, as well as Prot Warrior. So besides the slight confusion of BM and Marksmanship being changed, despite having gotten a rework recently, having gotten their whole general talent tree changed, much of their spec tree change, especially Marksmanship, who just got like 90% of their talent tree changed just this patch, and even a full rework of all of their hero talents, they are still getting an overhaul for patch 11.2. At this point, we can't really be surprised about Shadow Priest being changed. Shadow Priest is contractually obligated to receive reworks every expansion, so this is not a surprise. Finally, at least, we see some attention going the way of Brewmaster, and even to some degree for Prot Warrior. And then also we can be fine with Frost DK, who has been quite the same simplistic spec for quite a while without many changes. It's also nice to see them being touched on. Perhaps the last one of the specs you might have wanted to see in here would have been Guardian Druid, which is missing. But still, 7 different specs receiving significant talent tree changes for a patch is a pretty good number. At this point, what is left to see is just the degree of the changes, how it will continue to be shaped before the release of the patch. The last bit of the news, which we left for last because it isn't technically a bit of news, is the fact that as part of the encounter design of the Demon Hunter Council fight you will have in the raid, there is three Demon Hunters. The one to the left looks like a traditional Havoc Demon Hunter, the one to the right looks like a traditional Vengeance Demon Hunter, so who's the guy in the middle? Why is he all Void themed, and why are you having, a council fight with Demon Hunter specs and there is 3 of them instead of 2? to further spread the memes, this has also apparently been leaked as well. So there is the possible words and news and whispers in the corridors about a new Demon Hunter DPS spec. As if we needed more DPS specs, and as if especially we needed more Demon Hunters running around. So these, after this long list of recapping what's coming in 11.2, are all of the news launched so far. Of course, we'll get more info on the more important ones, like as we mentioned, the tuning passes to these 7 specs and a few other bit of details, like for example the raid testing that will go live in about a week. It will start about a week from now. But as for what was announced yesterday, this is all that is available. So for today, on this Thursday, this was the recap of the announcement of patch 11.2. So with this said and out of the way, we can now leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with of course everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, it's about time we make the switch from headphones to earphones based on the heat we are currently under.